Good evening, everybody. Just be a couple minutes of some music for your listening pleasure before we go on our show. Some people complain that we put music on at the beginning, but it's just to get some people on the stream, because once we start, you miss the beginning. So enjoy the music while it plays, and we'll be with you shortly. Friday the 13th. Hope your Friday the 13th is going well. Us Hungarians celebrate Thursday the 12th.
Welcome, everyone, to Mexican Crossing Lines with your hosts, Cindy Gomez-Schempp
and Duke Gomez-Schempp.
You're listening to 88.1 FM, KPPPLP, Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. Tonight, my show, Spin Doctors, is actually about doctors with their own spin. This time, it's about flu vaccinations for children in detention facilities. I'm sure you've seen it all over the news, probably all over your Facebook or Twitter feeds. People are talking about it. And when I saw all of the people in the Border Support Network and the Standing Rock Phonies groups that were sharing it, I knew there had to be something fishy about it. And so I started to look into it, and tonight I have the report on who and what is behind it, including the media people that have shared it, like Digital Smoke Signals.
Oh, yeah.
And Wendy Fry of the San Diego Union Tribune, as well as the doctors involved, at least some of them, and who they're connected to, like Dr. Julie Sierra, who's a board member of Mark Lane's Minority Humanitarian Foundation. As you know, these are all groups. The Minority Humanitarian Foundation is a group that has been connected to the larger smuggling operation with Pueblos Sin Fronteras. Another doctor, Mario Mendoza, actually works both, has been a featured speaker for Voto Latino, and also runs an organization called Life Undocumented, defending the rights of undocumented people. And we'll also look at some of the organizations connected to these doctors, like their Doctors for Camp Closure group that most of them belong to, as well as the Refugee Health Alliance, who works in close connection to Border Angels and Otro, Lado. Both groups that have been featured working very closely with the smuggling operation of Pueblos sin Fronteras. Never Again Action is also a group that is connected to the protest and the arrests that took place in front of a detention facility. And they're sponsored by Movimiento Cosecha, who are the founders of the Caravan Support Network, later to be known as the Border Support Network. They helped to fund and organize that whole caravan movement. So there are also politics and politicians behind this support and this Doctor for Camp Closure scandal, arrest, scandal, scam, whatever you want to call it, including People for Bernie Sanders, that is. The Border Support Network, of course, Pueblos sin Fronteras, and Diversidad sin Fronteras. If you recall, the leader of that group is the transgender activist who was passing herself off as a refugee, a member of the LGBTQIA caravan, and was later found to actually be a Harvard graduate student.
I know who you're talking about. You're talking about Putaya Queen.
That's right. Roberto Nakai Flote, Pitaya Queen, OJ Pitaya, all of the different names that she has been known for, and which she must need to use to hide her true identity, especially from authorities like those in Mexico who were seeking to charge her for trafficking children. I have done numerous shows on the crimes committed by the folks in these organizations of trafficking, of smuggling, fake marriages, all sorts of pretty unethical and criminal things. So I want to thank everyone who has sent me the information about all of this stuff. I also want to ask for you guys to go to our YouTube channel, Duke1517, and subscribe and like, as well as our 88.1 FM Fargo Moorhead page, so you can get notified when we go live, and you can follow all of our other programs by going to kpppfm.com. You can email me at Cindy at kpppfm.com, or Duke at kpppfm.com. There's a lot of P's in there, Duke.
I know. Our name too, it's KPPP, and it's Schempp PPP.
Yep.
P's everywhere. Thank you everyone for your support. We got a greeting in the mail today. Thank you very much. You know who you are. Been making monthly donations to us.
Beautiful
and
Christmas
a card that says season's greetings and wishing us all blessed season and a happy new year. Thank you very much. If you'd like to support our work, go to kpppfm.com/donate. You can make a tax-deductible donation. In fact, it would be great to have a year-end tax-deductible donation made to our organization. We use the funding to keep running. We have community members coming into the studio doing shows. We do shows, and we do a lot of coverage in the local area. We also do live streams on Facebook and YouTube. As Cindy said, make sure you go to YouTube and go to Duke1517 and subscribe to our channel so you'll get notified. You're on Facebook right now, and 88.1 FM Fargo Moorhead. I don't know what's going on with the notifications. Actually, when we started the stream tonight, I didn't get one, but I knew we were live, and I finally had to go directly to the page, and that way we're live. And maybe the notification's in my, my message box right now, but it didn't notify me right away. So we tend to try to do announcements a little ahead of time. You can find us on Facebook, and also you can find us at the People's Press Project of Mexi-Can. Now, when you're at our webpage, kpppfm.com, don't hesitate to look around at some of the information we have there. Besides the donation, you also have a business opportunity. You can basically make a contribution to our organization. We'll run a underwriting advertisement for you throughout the day, throughout the week, depending on your donation. And you will get recognized for making a contribution, and you get a tax deduction in the process. I'd like to thank last month's underwriting sponsor, Make My Life Great Again, PalomaForTrump.com. That's Paloma, the number 4, Trump.com. If you'd like to advertise on the radio station in the form of underwriting, please contact us. Go to kpppfm.com and look at the underwriting opportunities, and we'll work with you. Just because what's on that page says what the rates are, we'll definitely work with you. So check it out and have a great show tonight.
I don't know if you heard this controversy or how much of it you heard, Duke, but there was a big controversy in social media, and it was all about flu vaccinations. The first thing that I want to sort of just throw out there is the fact that there is a controversy over flu vaccinations in particular, in and of themselves, about how effective they are, about how, the different strains, and whether or not you should get tested, you don't seem to think that they're very effective.
No, I don't. I don't think they're effective, but of course I had the flu in the early 1960s, and so I developed some sort of immunity to it, the original strains that we were getting in the 1960s in the United States. I've never had a flu shot because I always think that from what I've read, they're always a strain they're developing before the real strain actually hits. They're ineffective, and I think they just kind of make a lot of people sick, but they're so hyped up. It's like every pharmacy you go to, they'll give you a flu shot. Cindy always gets pressured into flu shots because it sounds horrible. You're going to get sick and die if you don't get one of these, and it's like, well, that's scary. Get one. I don't want you to die this winter. But it's like, I never get them, and I've had the flu, when I was young, but I haven't had the flu since I was young. And that might make a difference for me personally, but I can't judge other people and their immune systems,
Aha! That's exactly right. And let me just stop there to say, people with weakened immune systems, people that have had cancer, like yours truly, people that have upper respiratory issues, like yours truly, those people are encouraged to get a flu vaccination to avoid getting the flu, because when folks that have weakened immune systems get the flu, they can get very sick. They can even end up in the hospital with pneumonia. But by the same token, you shouldn't get a flu vaccination when you're already sick, right? Everybody knows that if you're already feeling the effects of a flu or a cold, getting a flu vaccination will only make it worse. And that is especially true of children. So the argument which is being had on social media about the group of doctors that showed up at a detention facility offering free flu vaccinations for the children, we're not discussing whether or not the plan was a feasible plan, whether or not it was something that is possible in our society. Because here's the thing, folks. Doctors work in institutions. They're familiar with things like HIPAA and privacy and the requirements of institutions working with each other, sharing information between law enforcement, for example, and doctors when there is a shooting or any number of different injuries that are derived from some type of criminal behavior, right? And these doctors, if they're really doctors, would probably know that institutions have to do things by the rules of the institution that they work in, or by the laws of the community that they live in, or the state or the country that they live in. As far as I know, here in America, if you're in a detention facility, which operates much like a prison, they have doctors in-house. They have personnel that do whatever the facility is required to do under the law, how they're allowed to do it. They don't usually let rando strangers, even if they're doctors, come into their facility and administrate injections into the children without knowing the chain of custody of where those things came from. They can't legally do it. That's nuts. And also, I got to thinking about this, and I was like, You know, when I first heard that there was hordes of pro bono attorneys going to the border to give legal advice to asylum seekers, I thought, what? Am I in some dystopian future? That doesn't exist. I've worked with lawyers most of my adult life. And while there are some very generous, kind, and very skilled lawyers, I have not yet been able to find one that is willing to work for free.
Yep.
Even when they say that they are willing to take a case pro bono, it's usually because in some way they get to offset those things from the firm to defray costs of the firm. It's also used as a way of showing, goodwill in the community. But lawyers are about making money. You don't can't find somebody that's willing to take on a case, especially not a complicated and lengthy case like an asylum claim that can take years.
Exactly. It takes filing fees too. I mean, there's all sorts of fees that come along with everything you file, every time you make a motion, every time you take another pleading to the court. It costs money, and I've never gotten a free lawyer for anything. We've gotten, reduced rates, those sorts of things, but very, very hard to come by where someone says, I'll just do it for free, and they're jumping right into really, really complicated cases.
And again, it was very interesting when that happened. I thought, are these people doing what they say they're really doing? And of course, when you and I went down to Tijuana to investigate, we had a hell of a time finding migrants that had lawyers. And then later on, months after my reporting came out nationally that 1% of the migrants that came to seek asylum have gotten pro bono attorneys, have gotten any attorneys at all, which I think proves the fact that these groups, these multiple groups like Al Otro Lado, who are raking in millions and millions of dollars, are lying to people about all of the clients that they're helping. In fact, it turns out they don't really take individual cases. They're using that money for lawsuits against the Trump administration, against Homeland Security, against Border Patrol, against anyone and everyone that will look into and or is investigating their smuggling operation or their complicity with it. And when I found out there was a bunch of doctors going and working for this protest and coming up with free vaccinations, taking the day off to go vaccinate kids at a detention facility, I said, who are these doctors?
Yeah, really.
Because I worked with doctors for most of my adult life. And while there are very good, skilled doctors, while there are very, very generous and kind doctors, I had a hell of a time finding a doctor that was willing to take even hours out of his day to go and testify in court on behalf of their patient. Even when that meant that patient was going to lose all access to medical care and or insurance money or services. I had to threaten to bring them in on a subpoena because they talked about their worth and how much time they would be losing, how this would affect their practice, how they would have to reschedule patients. I can't do that. Somehow there's a whole mess of these doctors. They can just do that. Question I have is, are they having some kind of full-time practice? Because I don't know how you can do that and be an activist for these campaigns as well. So I was very interested when I saw Digital Smoke Signals post doctors wanting to give the migrants these flu shots. I thought, okay, if Digital Smoke Signals is talking about it,
it's got to be a scam.
This is not the only place. You can see there in that post that they mention that the doctor that was quoted here saying people die of the flu, but the people who have died of the flu in Customs and Border Protection, CBP, custody was completely preventable, Dr. Julie Sierra said. Keeping people in hygienic conditions and not overcrowding them and giving them soap and access to shower that can help prevent illness, but nothing prevents the flu like a flu vaccine.
Okay.
Well, again, I don't know if that's really true. I mean, there's a lot of people that would argue that you could cause a lot more damage with the flu vaccine if you got a bunch of people, especially little kids that have been traveling through the desert or they've been living in a tent city along the border waiting to, cross into the United States rather than going to a shelter where people are getting sick.
And too, someone even mentioned on the comments in our show that the vaccine can take a couple of weeks actually to work. So if you already have the flu, like you said, you don't take the vaccine, and and again, I haven't really looked at the science behind it. That 100 flu shots to 100 different people, that it prevent the flu on all 100 people. I don't even know what any of that stuff is. But I don't believe what that doctor said, that if the flu shot would have been there, this would have been preventable.
Folks, here's where the hypocrisy lies. Here's where the hypocrisy lies for me. I watched organizers associated with the Border Support Network in Tijuana organizing the migrants to sleep in tents in sewer-filled streets, in the cold, in the rain, with their kids. The more kids, the better. The more the optics of pity that these folks generated in the American psyche, the better. They hyped up the deaths of two young men that went to hire a prostitute, got robbed and killed on their payday, painting a picture that the horrendous dangers of forcing migrants to stay in Tijuana was what killed these two young men, when it was the fact that they did not go to a shelter and they were living in those tent cities in the streets at the behest of the American organizations that brought them there, that have been working as part of this smuggling operation to bring them into the United States. So they cause the chaos that bottlenecks all these people at certain locations, first in Tijuana, now in Matamoros, where they're living in tent cities in horrible conditions that make people sick. And then where many of them are crossing the river, and then they're going into what these activists themselves call the freezers, the hieleras. Many of them already sick. And so then they make demands of the agency that is tasked with processing and holding these individuals for anywhere from 1 day to 4 days or 5 days. I think that's pretty hypocritical. You cause the problem, then you go and decry the problem at the doorstep of the facility that you sent these people to request asylum. And what's even more hypocritical is that they don't really have any intent of vaccinating all the kids, nor do they really care about the outcomes for those kids. And let me show you how I know that. But first, let's look at the arrest video. Also, another person that tweeted this out was Wendy Fry. That's how I knew it didn't pass the smell test. She seems to like to promote Wendy Fry of the San Diego Union Tribune, who has done many favorable articles about the Border Support Network group, many of whom are criminals, as I have shown you on this program. She tweeted about it, saying that DHS has called the group of doctors protesting outside of CBP in San Diego radical political activists. Yes, because that's what they are. Rightly so, CBP. And it goes on to say that who are looking to inject people with drugs. Yes, they don't know what's in those needles. In fact, among the group of doctors are a transplant surgeon and the president of the California Medical Association. And if you scroll, the next thing she says there is a pediatrician from Boston's Children's Hospital and a UC San Diego health primary care physician, to name a few. And one of those primary care physicians she's referring to from UC San Diego, I believe, is Julie Sierra, mentioned in the Myron Dewey Digital Smoke Signals tweet. And in this video, you'll see them getting arrested. She linked to this video of the arrest of these doctors in the arrest video.
One moment, it's not showing up.
Right there. It's right at the bottom.
Yeah,
I just saw you go by it right there.
It's not showing up.
Right
Just
right there.
Hold on for a minute.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's not showing up.
That's not good. Just cover for a few seconds.
Okay.
I'll get it set up.
All right. So among the people that were getting arrested was a doctor from originally from El Salvador, who was laying on the ground. The doctors were in the video you're about to see. They lay on the ground. They were chanting at the gates of Border Patrol that they weren't going to leave the gate until they let them vaccinate. That's pretty good, huh? That little rhyme they came up with. We will not leave this gate until you let us vaccinate. Well, folks, let me share with you that before they did that, they sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security and HHS, Health and Human Services, telling them in this long letter that talks about the dangers of putting people in conditions where they don't have access to proper hygiene, and they don't, in close quarters in large numbers, and you have an epidemic waiting to happen, basically, and that, the flu season is upon us, and you've already had a bunch of other kids die in your custody, so we suggest that you let us immediately come down there and administer some vaccines. And so, and I believe that the number, and I'll show the letter here in a minute. I believe that the number of vaccines that they said that they could offer to give was 100, exactly 100. And the first question I had was, is that all of the people? Is that all of the kids? How do they know? And did it matter? Because to me, it seems like it might have just been a whole, a stunt, a publicity stunt, and it didn't really matter to them. I don't think that in order for them to find out how many vaccines they needed to properly vaccinate all of the people in there, including the adults, because why just vaccinate the kids if you're going to leave all of the adults unvaccinated?
Exactly.
Right? You would have to ask CBP, you would have to ask how many people are in the facility on any given day that you're going to be there, so you have enough. But that didn't matter to these folks because this was just a stunt, you see. It was just a stunt for publicity and for outrage, so that people out there would see this and go, what? You don't want to vaccinate children? Are you a monster? But again, I don't think that they, ever intended to get in. They just wanted to make a scene, and that's exactly what they did. Here is that video.
Death! No more death!
The police are picking people in doctors' coats and scrubs off of the floor. That one just took off his stethoscope. Do you need a stethoscope to administer a vaccine?
You just have to look.
I'm asking.
You have to have one to look like a doctor.
Well, I mean, these people look like they're suited up for something much more complicated than a vaccine.
They got scrubs on, lab coats.
They have scrubs on, lab coats, stethoscopes. It's like, this is more for show than it is for medicine.
I see that.
All I'm doing is making a point here. I believe people should get vaccinations, okay?
Yeah.
The anti-vaxxers need to stay away from me. I don't want to get people mad, okay? I am just saying, I don't think everyone agrees on how effective they are, especially the flu vaccine, because there's so many strains. And also, these people are clowning, okay? Let's get real. this Mario Mendoza was tweeted by Wendy Fry. He's the doctor I was telling you is from El Salvador.
Okay.
He came here in 1981 when he was a child with his mother and his brothers as an undocumented person. And he says they were denied political asylum. And then he explains why he's willing to get arrested. And later on, I checked out, who is this guy? What is he connected to? I find out he was a speaker for the Voto Latino. Here he is as a featured speaker from the U.S. Medical Affairs, the Pfizer Corporation. Oh, he was from Big Pharma.
Oh, yeah.
Scrolled up at the very top, you can see on the page that this comes from votolatino.org and the speakers that they've had. Yeah. So he's definitely, the name says it all. It's about Latin votes. So politics, yes. And in this film, this page that he's the founder of, it shows that he started the organization lifeundocumented.org. Now, when I looked at these pages, I found these were pretty new pages. They didn't have a lot. It wasn't completed. You know how you have a page where it has the squares for where things are going to go, and then there's some gibberish language in the squares.
Yeah. Oopsum.
Yeah, like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what their page looked like in other places.
Okay, so this is
very new. Is doctors for camp closures. Also very new. But in this video, in these clips, I'm going to show you from a video that he tells a little bit of his background. You find out he actually became a citizen along with his family thanks to a Republican policy called Amnesty under Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
Here you go. There's a U.S.-Mexico border, 1981.
Okay.
I ran across the U.S.-Mexican border in 1981 when I was 7 years old. I did not think at all I was doing anything wrong, that I was committing a crime, or that I was a criminal. I was running for my life.
The United States, a nation of an estimated 325 million people according to the latest U.S. Census, has more immigrants than any other country in the world. According to the Pew Research Center, there are an estimated 45 million immigrants in the U.S. About 11 million of these are undocumented.
I ran across the border for about 12 hours overnight, and it was me and a coyote, the guide, the smuggler. My mom and my brother ran 24 hours prior. There were surveillance helicopters with lights about 10 or 20 feet away from us at times. So we had to sit very still until the helicopter passed, and then we would immediately start running again. I was giving it my all at that age. I just thought, if I don't do this, I just pause and die here, wherever that was.
Okay. Now, I got to pause here to talk a little bit about smugglers, okay? Yeah. Louis Monsivice would tell you that, as a felon, a former felon for smuggling people, would tell you, who was part of this border support network, by the way, admitted smuggler, would tell you it is a family business. For money, of course, but it is a family business. And they help people. They don't hurt people. And when I went to this guy's bio, there is many places that he has been interviewed in articles and on different organization pages talking about his journey. He talks in very glowing terms about his smuggler, his coyote. He talks about how he didn't see himself as a criminal, and he didn't see the guy that was guiding him as a criminal either. He was a guide. And I know that for a lot of people who came here undocumented, who are hardworking, law-abiding, tax-paying, contributing members of society and have been for decades, this does not apply to you. But the reality is that immigration, migration, the motivators, the push and pull factors that drive people over the borders, they're changing. They always do morph and change over time and dependent on different things, like they did in the 80s when millions of farmers affected by the NAFTA agreement came flooding into the U.S. Okay? Or like they did during the Obama administration when we had a whole bunch of Central American unaccompanied minors. Things change. And as they change, so can the circumstances of who's crossing you and their motivations. And the first thing that you have to accept when you're talking about this is that for some of the people, for many of the people maybe, the experience of coming here with a smuggler or 2 or 3 or 5 may be Jim dandy. They may have a lifelong friendship and send each other Christmas cards. But for another large percentage of the population migrating, especially right now, there is a series of crimes that they must endure, which include coercion, extortion, rape, murder, disappearance. And there's an unprecedented number of children being brought because these specific migrants coming in now are asylum seekers, which means they need to get somehow inside of the U.S. to await the 2-3 long years they're going to have to wait until their asylum hearing. But in order to be released from detention, more likely than not, and in order to get work permits so you can support yourself while you await your hearing date, more likely than not, are parents with dependent children. Which means that the instances of people kidnapping children out of Central America to have a kid, people bringing children that are sick, that are disabled, off the charts, people recycling children, which we've also seen. And all of that is putting people at risk, putting children at risk. The reality is that just because your smuggler wasn't bad to you, didn't act in a criminal fashion, doesn't mean that all smugglers are law-abiding, kind people. In fact, they're criminalized. They are put in jail for smuggling people, like what happened to Luis Monsiváis, because it's a crime to do that. When two parties are complicit in a crime, like people sometimes are when they're brought to this country by smugglers, it doesn't make it any less a crime or the person that committed it a criminal. Whether or not, to what degree that criminal is violent and dangerous varies by degrees. The same way that just because your drug dealer isn't a violent criminal, dangerous criminal, doesn't mean that everyone's is. Okay? So, this man who obviously has a soft spot, he is an undocumented person. He only was able to stay in this country because of amnesty.
Okay.
And you saw that in the video there. They talk about how, during the Reagan administration, they received amnesty. And in order to qualify for amnesty, you had to show that you had been living in the United States for a period of years. I believe it was something like 10. Could have been 5. I think they might have just barely made it to qualify. And you had to prove that you'd been working the entire time. And a bunch of other requirements. So that does not translate to the people seeking asylum today. Mm-hmm. Those people have a less than 10% chance of actually being granted asylum unless something radically different is happening within immigration law that I am not privy to. And what that means is people are being sold false hope, and they're being exploited in the process.
Yep.
The Minority Humanitarian Foundation also has a doctor involved, Julie Sierra, and they posted about both her and Peter Kennelly.
Don't you want to see other two clips that you had on here?
Oh, yes. I didn't know that they weren't all together. I thought they were going to play all at once. Oh, please play them, please.
Okay, here we go.
Yes.
Here's a second clip.
I thought that they had played. People are going to wonder what I was talking about.
In El Salvador in 1981. This was during the Salvadoran Civil War. She was working on equal pay and equal rights for female teachers. The government didn't like that type of work. And so she received death threats at her school. And she was told that if she didn't leave the country, they would kill her and her 2 sons. She wanted to stay in El Salvador. But in fact, teachers were showing up dead all over the place. So she had 2 choices, either stay and risk being killed and her 2 sons being killed, or leave El Salvador and come to the U.S.
In 1986, as part of the Immigration Reform and Control Act signed by President Reagan, around half of the undocumented immigrants were allowed to apply for a pathway to citizenship.
This administration asked the Congress to pass a comprehensive legislative package, including employer sanctions, other measures to increase enforcement of the immigration laws, and legalization. The Act provides these 3 essential components.
Because we arrived in the United States before 1982, we were blessed and eligible to apply for the 1986 Immigration Reform Act, otherwise known as Amnesty. The only one since then. My mom had to show that she was employed. She went through a full background check, so a fully vetted process.
Our objective is only to establish a reasonable, fair, orderly, and secure system of immigration into this country, and not to discriminate in any way against particular nations or people.
We were able to stay here because of that amnesty and really take full advantage of all the opportunities in the U.S., including going through the educational system. Today, I'm a physician, not a criminal or rapist or a murderer.
So, it's a completely different thing here that he was under. Millions of people were given a pathway to citizenship if they met certain requirements. That is not the case. Not for even half of the people that are coming to seek asylum. Not even a third. Not even a quarter. So it is cruel. It is wrong to overburden and try to break the systems of Mexico and the United States. And overburden our structures and our institutions, and then blame them for not doing enough for the people that they helped to round up and give false hopes to. That's what's inherently different and inherently so wrong about this. The Minority Humanitarian Foundation has its fingers all over this, spin doctor thing with their board member, Dr. Julie Sierra. As you can see here, they posted about the doctor protest in Chula Vista at Border Patrol headquarters. The doctors listed there are, he says, our board members, Dr. Julie Sierra and Peter Kennelly. So board members of the Minority Humanitarian Foundation working closely with the group Pueblos sin Fronteras being investigated for human smuggling and trafficking are involved with these spin doctors. That's another reason that this stinks to high heaven. And she works at UC San Diego. Here is the provider finder for UC San Diego. You can see at the very top that it says that she is a doctor at UC San Diego's facility. And there is also a post about her being a board member on their page where they share an article that is in Vice magazine. And in this article from Vice, she is talking about how Border Patrol basically refused to let her and other doctors give these free flu shots to the people in the hospital. And she talks up, and they link to the letter here that that was sent previous to the protest to Health and Human Services and the Department of Homeland Security, in which they say that they are requesting immediate permission to access the Border Patrol Detention Center in San Isidro, California, with at least 4 volunteer physicians licensed to practice medicine in the state of California, and that they will be providing 100 doses of the influenza vaccine. That's all they brought.
Wow.
That's the size of a small meeting.
Yeah.
In Fargo.
Yeah.
I doubt that a facility, any
Only had
facility,
100.
especially at this time when we have so many people, has only 100 people there.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's a little weird?
Yeah, I think it's totally off. It's like, I think that makes it more suspicious.
And later on, in the same Vice article, it talks about the other organization. By the way, she says in this Vice article that they never thought, just like I told you, they never expected to actually be allowed to go inside and vaccinate anyone.
Oh, yeah.
She admits it. She's like, basically, this is just a stunt. We knew that they were never going to let us in there for a variety of reasons, obviously. And basically the article says here that they knew that they weren't going to be denied. We were pretty sure they were going to say no, but they hoped that they would say yes because they were offering to provide the vaccines for free, right? It wouldn't cost them anything, so they should just take them, right? And then she was asked, why did you expect them to say no? And she said, well, there's other interactions I have with Border Patrol because I work with this group of, I work on the border, on both sides of the border with asylum seekers, there's that word, with the group called Refugee Health Alliance. And so I look up Refugee Health Alliance and find out that, oh, by the way, Refugee Health Alliance, which was formed in 2018 in response to the increasing medical need at the U.S. border, was originally operating a clinic out of a space called Enclave Caracol.
Oh, my
The
goodness.
same place where the crooked lawyers of Al Otro Lado are, the same place with all of the activists from the United States connected to Antifa go, the same place that basically acted like there was a 3-alarm fire happening outside when Oscar El Blue Ramirez and I showed up.
Exactly.
Is where they were operating out of. But if you put that slide back up, you'll notice they also talk about the fact that at some point they moved to a place called Preven Casa. And Preven Casa has actually got its own history in Tijuana because they are in a pretty bad, dangerous place where lots of bad things happen. In the north zone of the city. And their original mission was to go out and try to vaccinate people against HIV and other, diseases, communicable diseases. Because why? Well, as it says on the page, when you click on that link that takes you to their page, and of course this is in Spanish, so I'll tell you what it says. They're in the north part of the zone, known as Red Zone or the Tolerance Zone, which is where they're located, is a particular part of the city where you can regularly watch people consume and sell illegal drugs, where sex workers are, and a high flow of migrants. Okay? And also people living on the streets. People that are homeless, basically. So that's where the new clinic that they're hanging out at is. I don't know what happened. Maybe they got kicked out of Enclave Caracol, or they're expanding. Who knows? But I was like, oh, this makes more sense. And then I went and clicked on their collaborators page to see who's the Refugee Health Alliance working with.
Exactly.
Well, of course, we already knew they were in Enclave Caracol, but this makes it a little more clear for you. The Border Angels, Al Otro Lado, Identitix, I don't know what the Identitix is. Preven Casa, there's the new place where they're at, not Enclave Caracol anymore. The Harmon Family Foundation, I don't know what that is, and the Transgender Law Center. When I saw the first two, I was like, you had me at Border Angels.
Yeah, exactly.
You had me at Border Angels. And the Doctors for Camp Closure's website is kind of an interesting visit. It is weird because normally these groups call themselves nonprofits. Sometimes they aren't even nonprofits. But this one tells you it's a nonpartisan organization. When the heck is that?
Well, I don't know why they would go swinging on that, because nonprofits are supposed to be nonpartisan.
Right.
But it's like,
but why would they say that? Because they're not a nonprofit and they don't want to claim anyone?
I suspect that they're putting that out there to say that they're not left-leaning or right-leaning, that they're not part of these political groups, that they're actually part of.
Oh, they totally are left-leaning. Yeah. All the way to the left. And again, I advocate for vaccines. I definitely feel that prevention is key. Medical care is important. People in detention should have access to it if they're sick, and they do. And not always right away, not always in the time frame that they need it or that they're able to be transported. But of course, all of those things are dependent upon factors that are, kind of destroyed when you have overcrowding because of the crisis that's created by so many people seeking asylum. That is exacerbated, is what they call it. The Doctors for Camp Closure. Did you put up the website for me?
Yes.
The Doctor for Camp Closure website.
Yep, we had that up.
Oh, that's right. We looked at it, and it said that are nonpartisan. And then we have the the DCC Ian Kim admin. So if you go one before that, please, the admin one, it says here at the bottom of the page.
Oh, this one down here.
That one that says admin screenshot.
Yep, got it. That one.
It says here that the page on Facebook for Doctors for Camp Closures is this person, among other admins on the page, named Ian Kim. And she has as a mutual friend a former executive director of one of the major nonprofit organizations for media justice. So I decided I'm going to check out her about, because it sounds like she's not just a doctor.
Yeah.
What is this doctor besides a doctor? Because a lot of these folks are many things, like the guy that's starting this Undocumented Foundation.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
She is too. If you look at her about section on her Facebook page, Ian Kim's about tells you, among other things, she is a keyboard player for a music group called Dialectic or something like that. I can't.
Dialectic.
It's too small for me to read, but I think that's what it says, something like that. And she is Dialectic. I'm sorry.
Dialectic.
She's also a resident at UC Davis Health with Dr. Julie Sierra. She was a former managing director at Rebuild the Dream, a former campaign director for the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. She studied medicine at UC Davis. That's where she's studying currently. She's a resident, excuse me. And she studied nonprofit organization management, internal finance at Yale School of Management. Sounds like that's really the big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the big one right there. Organizing management, nonprofit organizing management. So then I decided to look at the Department of Homeland Security's response to this. And DHS's press secretary tweeted out this tweet saying, of course, Border Patrol isn't going to let a random group of radical political activists show up and start injecting people with drugs. Duh. Yeah. We don't do that.
Exactly.
That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what I said. Why would they do that?
Yeah, exactly.
I think these folks knew that people will not do that. But that, again, this shows you basically what this is, which is a stunt. Mm-hmm. And CBP also put out a statement saying that, in general, neither CBP nor its medical contractors administer vaccines to those in our custody. That's due to the short-term stay of detainees in our custody, the time it takes for a vaccine to take effect. Oh, you brought that up, Duke.
Yep.
And the complexities of operating a vaccination program. Persons in our custody who require a vaccine are referred to local area health systems and, if deemed necessary, will be vaccinated by medical personnel at that site. During situations that involve public health concerns, CBP coordinates with local health care authorities and Center for Disease Control and Prevention as appropriate.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. So, you can see there's the concern that maybe you thought they had is not really there.
Yeah, exactly.
Never Again is one of the groups that was also involved, along with Families Belong Together. Never Again is listed here, highlighted, along with the Doctors for Camp Closures and Families Belong Together, as one of the main groups that organized this protest at the Chula Vista Border Patrol station. And when you check out who they are, Never Again is connected to Movimiento Cosecha. On the page for Never Again Action, you see here that they mention, if you could make that big enough to read for me, please, that Never Again, to the right, it says, it turned out that our thousands of other people ready to react with us, Jews, allies, and our immigrant partners, Movimiento Cosecha. You remember that name, right?
Yeah.
Because Movimiento Cosecha was Movimiento Cosecha for Caravan Support Network. They were the ones that basically requested donations to start up the Caravan Support Network, which later became the Border Support Network. Mm-hmm. Border Liberation Front, which was posting prior to the Caravan Support Network, Border Support Network being basically the center of all of their communications about giving donations to the newly formed Caravan Support Network. And if you scroll down to the bottom, they're sharing a post of Movimiento Cosecha. That's whose post that is, asking for donations for the newly formed Caravan Support Network.
Yeah.
Who else was involved? People for Bernie Sanders.
Oh,
People for Bernie Sanders wanted you to donate to the Cosecha team. And they share the GoFundMe for the Caravan Support Network.
Okay.
And of course, Evan Duke was involved. He shares here all of the partners they're working with the Border Support Network, or Caravan Support Network as it was known back then, which is including Bridges of Love Across Borders, Brittany Gutierrez. And if you scroll down, they have other partners, which includes Movimiento Cosecha in number 3. There they are. Mm-hmm. That's who they're working with, not to mention Pueblos Sin Fronteras.
Exactly.
You remember the white guy that was sitting at the table after Irineo Mujica and Cristobal Sanchez got arrested and then they're freed? Tristan Call was that guy. He was the same guy that delayed people, Border Patrol, from being able to take 2 people into custody in the United States in Pittsburgh or something. I can't remember right now where it happened. That's the same Tristan Call. And here he is promoting Movimiento Cosecha. Tristan Call works directly with Pueblos Sin Fronteras. He's one of their main guys, especially in communications. Mm-hmm. And finally, we have Cosecha and Diversidad Sin Fronteras. There's Movimiento Cosecha in the same post with Diversidad Sin Fronteras, and that is Pitaya Queen's group. And as I said before, when I mentioned this is a group led by a transgender woman that has been charged with or accused of by authorities in Mexico of sex trafficking of children. And other things too.
Yeah.
But among those is working with Pueblos Sin Fronteras in part of this massive smuggling operation. So folks, how are these doctors fulfilling their Hippocratic oath of first do no harm? I think they're an utter failure. I think they're spin doctors.
Yep.
Thank you for being with us here on A Mexican Crossing Lines with your hosts, Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
You're listening to 88.1 FM KPPPLP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. Thank you and good night.